Hello friends, my name is RagePanda1 and we are back with another test and review of Maxroll.gg's leveling guide, and today we're going to be tackling the Void Knight. And the reason we're tackling the Void Knight today is because somebody told me in my comments that it's horrible and awful and they did not like it at all. So it's important that I try this. I'm sure that there's something masochistic about that, but we're going through with it anyway. There's a couple of things that I immediately am not in love with this build, and that is the fact that we are going to be using Rive for a lot of our damage with the early setup, and this time I'm actually going to go through with playing it that way. In the last video I gave myself a little leeway to have fun, and I spun around like a flaming dreidel for the entire beginning just to make my life a little bit easier. In its final form we're going to be spamming Vengeance, which is fine, but it's not exciting, you know, and that's the problem that I have here. We're going to be using Abyssal Echoes and hopefully having all of that going off and echoing our abilities that we're doing is going to make it exciting enough that it looks interesting, but just spamming Vengeance does not sound great to me. I would love to be wrong about this. I'm really looking forward to being wrong. Also, they say here that they want us to farm exiled mages so that we have a chance of getting the experimental gloves, which give us ward on missing health. That's fine. I get why they're doing it. They want our healing hands to be healing us as much as possible, and then that's turning into ward, and we really like doing that. Classic early game stuff we're going for here with gear. We're gonna go try to ignite, we're gonna try to bleed, and since we're using Rive to summon some little swords for us, we're gonna also be going for some minion damage so that they can be stacking that up for us as well. While they like to tell us that we're looking for specific base items for implicits, there's only a couple of them that are gonna matter in this early game, and that is probably this Jade Amulet, which is going to give us attack speed, and our Sentinel relic, the Sunrise Emblem, which is going to give us an extra chance to ignite. The other ones are just kind of giving us armor, and of course there's the movement speed on ring and boots, but that's for every single guide ever. Now under the pros here, it does say that they have high damage in the early and end game. That's great, but it also says for the cons that it has inconsistent damage. Does that mean that the mid game is going to be an unfun piece of garbage that we have to suffer through until we get to the end? I don't think it means that, but we'll find out together. Now you will notice if you look at my bar, I'm using exactly the skills they've told us to use because, I don't know, they don't mention anything else that you're ever supposed to press, so I figured I'd just leave it that way. Now, this build is holding a button and going forward at this point. Obviously this is not what the build is going to continue to be, but I'm literally just doing Rive, and that's it. That is it. I have a chance to summon these forged weapons when I kill things, so that doesn't help you that much against a boss. What I'm doing to compensate for that a little bit is I have these Keeper's Gloves that summon a swarm of bees, and it makes a little bit of a difference, but not much. It's okay. It's okay. This build is technically working, it's doing fine, but is it exciting and fun? Not at this point. I can't wait until we get some more skills. The chance on kill to summon one of these swords also applies on chance to hit bosses as well, but it's not a very high chance. Not very good at all. As you get farther in the tree, you get more of your stats from your main hand weapon if it's a two-hander, and you get more of the ailment. It literally doubles it. So that starts to be quite strong, and I can tell why they use this. But if you're looking for exciting fun, man, not the one. I'm literally just dashing and then holding attack, and that is it. That is it, buddy. Nothing flashy, just swinging a weapon. So it's cool that you summon a bunch of dudes. You can see all of the little health bars showing up. That's why I have the health bars on right now, so you can tell where my minions are and what they're actually doing. So that's fine. That's all good and well, but there's not much else to say about this part of the build. You're doing a bunch of dots, you're summoning some dudes when you're lucky, but it's not fun to play, in my opinion. So instead of continuing to show you clips of me literally just holding Rive until I'm blue in the face, I'm going to skip ahead until the mid-30s, and then we can get back together when we're getting closer to Monolith time. Well, do we ever have to have a talk about this build? See, I thought that I was going to hate it, and I did with the Rive. It's just kind of boring. It's fine. It works. But actually, with Abyssal Echoes, it feels kind of good. You don't actually have to stand here and fight things like I'm doing, but when you have to, then you just pop all your buffs and actually spam Vengeance, and it works fine. Otherwise, you can just keep running. You just hit them, put the damage over time on there, and keep on schmoving, baby. They'll keep following you. You'll end up killing them. You don't really have to worry about it too much. And if you do stand here fighting stuff, you're very tanky. I'm not even using potions. I don't really need them. Gonna keep an eye on it, obviously. But if I get to a boss, right, then I just then I just volatile reversal and everything instantly dies. It's pretty fun, pretty good. But the most important time-saving thing is that you just keep moving. You just let them rot behind you. You don't care. You don't need to sit there and swing. You just keep moving, and then nothing's even hitting you. You get a big enough group, sure, go back in, finish them off. You're gonna have yourself a great time, and it's pretty fast for campaign, to be honest with you. Pretty fast. I have a feeling that if I was stopping to kill everything I saw the second that I saw it and then moving on, I'd be having a really bad time. But we got huge damage over time here, so we don't have to do that. But let's try some stuff out against a guy who tends to be a tanky boy. After I'm standing by him for a second or two, then I'll do my volatile reversal to make sure it all lands where it's supposed to. And then Xbox controller strikes again, and we miss. That's fine. So we can just stand there and face tank the guy. We don't really even need to worry about it too much. Damage is fine, but we still have a lot of points that we need to be able to put in, so I'm not too worried about it. I think we're doing really good here. And for the record, for the people who just can't understand why I would play on controller, I'm finally gonna give you the breakdown. See, I have a really bad spine. I have bone spurs and spinal arthritis, and I had a disc completely removed, and it's just running on nothing. I also have a spine that is perfectly straight instead of having the curve that it needs to give cushion. So sitting up straight for me, walking around and doing all of that stuff, causes a lot of pain. When I'm using a controller, I can lean back, and you'll notice that I'm often leaning back pretty far, and it spreads the weight across my shoulders and down so it doesn't hurt quite so bad. When I'm playing on mouse and keyboard, I have to sit more at attention to be able to do that comfortably. Otherwise, I'm Frankensteining myself with my arms forward, and it's not very comfortable. So that's why I stick to controller as often as I possibly can, although I will game on mouse and keyboard if I absolutely have to. On this first monolith here, and I'm using the term first monolith loosely as I did die in my actual first monolith, it wasn't really anything to do with the build or the way that I was playing. It was just an unfortunate circumstance of poison on the ground that I couldn't quite see because there was 40 billion dudes. So I'm not too concerned about that. But in this actual monolith, you can see that just walking along and throwing up your dots is going to do just fine for the majority of the battle. And we get towards the end where we're fighting the big boss, and I don't even have to get out of his big attacks. I just stand there and face tank it and do all of my abilities in order, while I am trying to use volatile reversal to get my damage boost as often as possible. If I think there's a big attack coming and I can use volatile reversal as a miniature health potion, I will do that. I'll wait just a split second, and if I was wrong and nothing happens, I'll just pop it anyway. So there's a little bit of that cooldown management in this build that could make it difficult to play, but as you can see, for the most part, you're just running and gunning. It's not that difficult to play, but I don't feel like we have the full build yet because we're still waiting for our fancy time bubble, and I think that that's going to be a lot of fun to play with. My gear is really bad right now. That's also another reason why I died before, and it's because I am not at the level where I'm going to get the new gear, and it's not really worth making a whole new set of gear when I'm only a couple of levels away from being able to do that. So I need to continue grinding and unlock my other abilities and more passive points and more gear, and then we'll really be able to see how this build is working towards the end of its lifespan. And I have a feeling it only goes up from here because we're about to get healing hands. We're going to be healing like crazy, and when we get all the bonuses from our time bubble, it's going to be pretty nutty. So I'm looking forward to it. A couple of things real quick about the gearing process. They have you going for a spine rod here because of the implicit that gives you increased damage over time. That is a wonderful intrinsic buff that it gives you. And of course, we're looking for, very simply, void damage and damage over time. Elemental damage over time is not going to help us in this build because void is not considered elemental. That is fire, lightning, and cold damage. They also want us to have void penetration if we can get it. And I just finally got my hands on a spine rod that I could equip that actually had stuff that made it worth equipping, and it's been a huge damage increase, and I'm really happy with that. For the majority of the rest of this stuff, we're looking at taking defensive things here. We're looking at implicits that have resistances pretty much everywhere that we can get them, and since we're getting so many resistances from implicits, it gives us the ability on our suffixes to take some bonus health, which we like doing, so that is something to look out for. Other than that, in our final setup here, you'll notice that we have 5 points in the paladin tree, and that is specifically so that we can get healing hands unlocked. For me, because I always go to the Oracle's Abode and then I go right into monoliths, I am level 45 and I don't have my last specialization slot yet, but I do have healing hands unlocked already. I think the timing for that probably would be better if you were not skipping campaign like I'm doing, so I'm not going to judge the guide for that. That's on me. I'm the one who's skipping campaign, but there's really no point using healing hands until you're specialized in it so that it auto triggers when you're using your vengeance. And the spine rod that I do have comes with damage damage over time as an affix, but it's not perfect. You can see it's got a purple thing for minion damage. I don't even use minions. I don't care about that. I tried gambling on spine rods to get something decent, and I just couldn't find anything. So I'm going to be crafting this one up as I go and hoping for the best, but I'm going to keep my eye out for a different one that might be able to get better things on it. For now, it rolled really good with the implicit damage over time, and it happens to have its own damage over time, and I'm just going to focus on that. And they do talk to us on the guide about having gloves that we get from an exiled mage that's going to give us the, for however much health you're missing, you get ward. That's great and everything, and I was lucky enough to find a pair of those gloves, so I will be using that eventually, but we don't need to use that until we have healing hands being triggered off of our vengeance stacks. I have healing hands unlocked, right? I'm still not going to put on those gloves. I'm not going to cast healing hands. I'm going to wait until it's automatically proccing off of vengeance, and then I'll put those gloves on. And that's not really explicitly stated in the guide. I think they're just kind of assuming you're going to figure that one out. It's not that big of a logical leap to make on your own, but it might be worth mentioning for those who are just cruising along the guide. Don't want no eeny weeny teeny weeny shriveled little time bubble. Man, this thing is small. It's real small. I mean, this thing's wife is gonna leave it because it is so small. You're not gonna be using that time bubble for clear. That's just for extra damage on bosses, because ain't no way you're keeping a big group of dudes being affected by this time bubble and keeping yourself in it for the bonuses. So dotting and rotting still works perfectly fine, and I've been doing that a lot of the time, but every now and then you run back and you hit them with the old reversal and they just blow up. When you got a bunch of dudes following you like this, I like to train them along, and you can just throw up your dots and run into them, and when you volatile reversal, it'll put you back in the direction you're trying to go. So you can do both things. You can just dot and rot and hope for the best, or if there's starting to be more people than you want to deal with, you can just go ahead and do the volatile reversal and make them dead. Finally hit level 50, and I'm happy to say that with healing hands, while before we're even using it, we've already got the mana problem solved, and we're still only at 50% proc rate, which is fine. That was the problem that I made in the previous Sentinel build, is I thought that they went to 4 on this one for whatever reason, and I ended up without mana and I was healing every time. You don't want to do that. It's really not good, and that's why I didn't like it when that happened. But this time it's going to be essentially free. There's going to be some small mana cost, but nothing that we have to worry about, so that's just added survivability. Free real estate, baby. Alrighty then. So how is this build really? Well, when you're going through clearing the campaign in the early stages, when you're just using Rive, it is painfully boring because you are just dashing and holding one melee attack. Sure, you get the beautiful and wonderful swords that are following behind you, but it's nothing like the Forge Guard build where that actually turned into something really cool. It's just kinda pressing a button and moving along. For me, I didn't like that part. I could really do without it, and I know that Warpath isn't much different. You're kinda just moving and spinning, and we all know that I like that build. Maybe I just think it looks cooler. Maybe I like that I don't have to stop to hit things. I'm not sure, but for whatever reason, rolling with Rive in the early stages does not do the thing for me. However, when we switched into the endgame parts where we were actually using our Abyssal Echoes and switched over to Vengeance, I was able to just time rot things and move along and keep the pace going while I was using a little bit of movement and strategy to group up enemies and kill them as I kept going. I enjoyed that part quite a bit. In fact, I thought it was super fun to do that, and I was hoping that that was going to continue for all of the rest of time, and it sort of didn't. It was unfortunate, but the nice thing about this build is that it has a lot of tricks that make you do a crazy amount of damage. It is possible to do a lot of damage. The bad part is that you're doing a lot of work to do that damage. For some people, they might not think that's that fun. I sometimes think that that's really fun, but this one didn't quite hit it for me. I found that if I stood there and just whacked things with Vengeance and kept my debuffs up, then I was super tanky. But if I was jumping into a group to be able to do that, I initially was very not tanky, and it hurt real bad. So there was a bit of inconsistency there with the tankiness. Maybe there was just too many people and too many ranged people, and I just dove into the wrong group, but there was definitely a time where in between swings I got eviscerated and murdered, and that wasn't very fun at all. The time bubble, I think, was the big disappointment for me. I wanted it to be a little bit bigger, and when I say a little bit, I mean like twice the size. Yes, I still used it while I was clearing some of the general chaff on the echoes, and it did its job. It made people take a lot more damage. I got to use my volatile reversal. Getting used to that move and how it works, you can either use it when you're in melee and you have been so that you don't move at all, or you can dash into a group and then use it to return back to where you dashed to, get a bunch of damage in that way, and also get back on track to where you were trying to go. There's a little bit of something fun there, but I didn't quite like it. And I just think that it takes too much brain power when you're just trying to mindlessly farm. Maybe it's because I had a hard time recording this video. I had to stop and then start again, and I had to take breaks because my kids were being super loud. So I don't know, maybe I was just not in the right mood to be messing around, and I was in a bit of a hurry at that point. Could be. If you are in a hurry, I'm not sure this is the build. But if you're the kind of person that likes to manage your cooldowns and try to get the most out of a situation, and you want to be rewarded for doing combos that matter, then this could be the build for you. You might actually really enjoy it quite a bit. I didn't notice the echoes popping from just being a Void Knight. I didn't notice those doing that much. Every now and then they'd show up and it was kind of cool, but it wasn't that spectacular. And while we're going along here, you might notice that my damage is a little bit inconsistent, but when we get to the boss fight, the damage feels really low. It feels really bad. Partially that's because of my gear. My gear needed a little bit more going on in terms of the raw damage over time. I think that my void damage percentage was actually pretty decent here, but it took a long time to fight this boss, and being a melee build as it is, fighting the phylacteries in the corner was a nightmare. I have never had so much trouble. And then when the boss would run up and hit me, it would hurt real bad and it would be dangerous. Luckily, this build has a lot of healing built in, so that can be useful too. It's not that the build isn't strong, and the build is also very tanky, but just fighting this thing with melee in general is kind of a nightmare, and the fact that I have to get into the corner and do all of my big combo and get back into the corner and make sure I'm in the right spot to even be able to swing my weapon, it just was not working out. Not fun. And I know that's only going to be a problem for the one boss, and it's really not that big of a deal, but it is what it is. So in the middle of playing this character, there was a brief glimmer of hope that I was really going to have a good time, and I really was starting to, and it just faded away. So this is not the character that I'm the most excited to play again, and I agree with the people in my comments who said that this build was not very fun. It's just not quite doing it. But we do have a lot more fun builds coming in the future, and I think I'm going to be doing a mage next, so I need you guys to decide for me in the comments below if you'd like to see a sorcerer or a spellblade, since we've already done the rune master. I do have a spellblade that's already leveled up, and he's doing pretty good, but I'm still going to do testing the guide, and then I'll just delete the character afterwards, because I'm in this for you guys. And if you're in this for me, then go ahead and like and subscribe, because I'd like to provide some entertainment to you even more in the future. For now, I want to thank you for watching. I have been Rage Panda 1, and I will see you in the next one.